Scene 1. Ari arrives in Seoul. Visual reference. Ari at Incheon Airport, denim jacket, natural curls, hopeful golden glow, looking out at Seoul skyline. Incheon International Airport, arrivals hall. Airplane cabin ambience fading, the soft whoosh of landing, wheels touching tarmac, the hollow bell of the seatbelt sign clicking off. Beneath it all, a low, gorgeous swell of orchestral strings begins tentative, like the first breath before a song. Narrator. She had flown 9,000 miles on a dream and a debit card with $63 left on it. Ari Washington pressed her forehead against the oval window of the plane as it taxied toward the gate at Incheon International Airport, and she watched Seoul spread itself out before her through the pre-dawn gray, a city enormous and indifferent, glittering and vast, humming with a frequency she had never felt before but somehow impossibly recognized. Like a song she had never heard that she already knew every word to. She was 25 years old. She was exhausted. Her eyes were swollen from crying somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, somewhere between the life she had left behind in Atlanta and this terrifying, luminous unknown. Her carry-on was stuffed with a notebook full of half-finished lyrics, 2 changes of clothes, and the shredded remnants of a music career that had come apart at the seams 6 weeks ago and taken her heart with it when it went. She picked up her ring light and her lip gloss from the seat pocket and put them both in her bag without looking. Small acts of muscle memory. Small ways of pretending she was fine. She was not fine. But she was here. And that was something. The hiss and pressure pop of the airplane door. A rush of airport air, cool, recycled, carrying the faint mineral scent of a country she has never breathed before. The strings swell slightly. The terminal at Incheon swallowed her whole. It was impossibly clean, the floors gleaming like the surface of a frozen lake, the ceilings soaring in great pale arches overhead, the signage trilingual and precise. She walked through customs in a daze, her carry-on rolling behind her, her natural curls, dark brown and loose and enormous, after 9 hours in recycled air, catching the overhead light like a crown she hadn't asked to wear. She felt every pair of eyes that passed over her and forced herself not to flinch. She had always been the kind of woman who took up space, rich, warm brown skin, and a voice that filled a room and a laugh that arrived before she did. In Atlanta, she had learned to make that a superpower. Here, in a country where she didn't speak the language, couldn't read a single sign, and had exactly one friend waiting on the other side of the arrival's doors, she was learning to trust it again from scratch. She rounded the corner into the arrivals hall. The doors slid open, and she heard her name. The crowd hum of the arrivals hall, rolling suitcases, fragments of Korean conversation, a child crying somewhere, a distant Pennsylvania announcement. Then, rising above it all, Minseo. Ari. Washington. Oh my God. Narrator. Minseo Park was standing at the barrier with a handmade sign that read "Welcome to Korea," Queen in large purple letters, surrounded by small hand-drawn stars. She was jumping up and down, her straight black bob with its perfect curtain bangs bouncing with every leap, her round cheeks flushed pink with cold air and joy, her bright brown eyes already filling with tears before Ari had even made it through the door. Ari burst into tears at the exact moment Minseo did. They collided at the barrier like 2 planets that had been orbiting a mutual sun for too long and finally given in to gravity. Ari dropped her carry-on. Minseo dropped the sign. They held each other in the middle of the arrivals hall of one of the busiest airports in the world, crying and laughing in the specific, sacred way that only best friends who have been too far apart for too long are allowed to cry and laugh, without explanation. Without embarrassment, with the total and absolute safety of being known. Minseo. You're here. You're actually here. I kept thinking you were going to change your mind at the gate. Ari. I almost did. 3 times. Then I ate a whole bag of gummy bears over the Pacific and decided to be brave. Minseo. That's the most Ari Washington sentence I've ever heard. Ari laughed, a real one, the first one in weeks, the kind that started somewhere in the chest and didn't ask permission. It sounded good. It sounded like herself. She had been so afraid she had forgotten how to do that. Min-seo picked up the fallen sign and pressed it back into Ari's hands like a gift. Ari looked down at it. "Welcome to Korea, Queen." She folded it carefully and tucked it into her carry-on. Then Min-seo took her by the arm and steered her toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that faced the east, and for the first time, Ari Washington saw Seoul. The city was beginning to catch the first pale fingers of dawn. The Han River was a silver ribbon below 1,000 lit windows. Mountains rose in the mist at the edges of the skyline, dark and patient and ancient. And rising up from it all, towers, bridges, highways, neon, was something she could only describe later, in a song she had not yet written, as a heartbeat she could feel through the glass. Something shifted inside her chest. A door she didn't know had been locked. A melody she hadn't heard yet, low and sweet and foreign and somehow, impossibly, hers. "Ari." Min-seo. Soft, barely a whisper. "It's beautiful." Min-seo. "I know." She squeezes Ari's arm. "It gets better. Come on. I'm taking you to Hongdae before you sleep. You can sleep when you're dead, or at least when you're not in Seoul for the first time in your life." Ari picked up her bag. She took one last look at the city through the glass. And she made herself a silent promise, right there in the arrivals hall of Incheon International Airport, with her mascara on her cheekbones and gummy bear sugar still on her lips. Whatever brought her here, whatever heartbreak, whatever loss, whatever broken version of herself had climbed onto that plane, she was going to build something new from it. Here, in this city she didn't know yet. She was going to sing again. The orchestral swell lifts, brighter now, hopeful, a single piano note ringing like a struck bell as the strings carry it upward. Scene transition tone. Scene 2. Hongdae nights. Visual reference. Ari and Min-seo walking through vibrant Hongdae nightlife, neon signs, bouquet lights, warm friendship energy. Hongdae, Seoul, the beating artistic heart of the city. City ambience blooms the layered, gorgeous chaos of Hongdae at night. K-pop thumping from a boutique doorway. A street performer's violin cutting sweet and high above the crowd. The sizzle of street food on a hot griddle. Voices in Korean laughing, calling out. The whole world alive and neon-dipped and moving. Min-seo had not taken Ari to sleep. Min-seo had taken Ari to Hongdae. And Hongdae, as it turned out, did not care one bit whether you were jet-lagged, heartbroken, or operating on the last dregs of gummy bear courage. Hongdae simply picked you up and carried you along like a current, glittering and relentless and holy, devastatingly alive. They had come straight from the airport, Ari still in her denim jacket, curls wild from the flight, carry-on rolling behind her on the uneven pavement, and the night had already swallowed them whole. The streets of Hongdae pulsed and breathed like a living thing. Every building glowed. Every shop window threw its light in a different color, mint green, electric blue, hot coral, gold. Music poured from every direction at once, overlapping and layering into something that should have been noise, but was instead, somehow, a symphony. Ari walked with her head tilted back, spinning slowly as she moved, trying to take in everything at once and succeeding at none of it. She looked like a woman trying to drink a waterfall with a teaspoon. She looked like a woman who was, against every reasonable expectation, beginning to come alive. A burst of K-pop from a passing car. The crowd swells around them. A street performer starts a drum beat somewhere ahead, insistent, hypnotic. Ari. Min-seo. Min-seo, what is happening right now? What is this place? Min-seo. This is Hongdae. Art. Music. Street food. The heartbeat of Seoul's youth culture. Welcome to your new home, baby. Ari. There are so many people. What time is it? It's 3 a.m. Min-seo. Seoul doesn't sleep. You'll understand eventually. Come on, tteokbokki first, existential wonder second. Min-seo steered her to a street cart stationed under a red paper lantern, where a small elderly woman with bright eyes and a furious work ethic was stirring a wide flat pan of tteokbokki. Rice cakes in a deep crimson chili sauce that smelled of heat and sweetness and something that went straight to the oldest, most primal part of Ari's brain and told her she was home. Which made no sense at all. Which she decided not to examine. She ate the tteokbokki standing up on the sidewalk, sauce on her chin, curls getting in the way of every bite, laughing every time Min-seo had to rescue a rogue noodle from her jacket sleeve. It was the first meal she had eaten in 24 hours that she had actually tasted. The chili burned her lips. The sweetness came up behind it like a resolution. She finished the entire cup in 4 minutes and immediately wanted more. Ari. Okay. Listen to me very carefully. Still chewing. I am never going back to Atlanta. Min-seo. Laughing, you say that now. Give it a week and you'll be calling your mama crying about Waffle House. Ari. I will call my mama and eat this. Simultaneously. I am capable of loving more than one thing. They walked through the crowds after that, unhurried, absorbing. Min-seo pointed out every landmark, every beloved spot, the cafe shaped like a library, the underground vintage market, the alley painted floor to ceiling in murals so vivid they looked alive. Ari photographed everything and nothing. She kept forgetting to look at the phone screen because the thing itself was always better than the image of it. But every time they passed a performer, a man with a guitar busking outside a convenience store, a group of dancers in matching tracksuits doing synchronized choreography on a plywood stage, 2 girls harmonizing beautifully at a corner while a small crowd watched on their phones, Ari slowed down. She couldn't help it. Something in her body recognized the gesture before her mind did, the lean in, the stillness, the held breath of a person who cannot hear music without it doing something to her central nervous system. Min-seo noticed. She always noticed. She watched Ari stop for the 4th time in an hour, standing very still at the edge of a small crowd surrounding a lone saxophonist playing a mournful, gorgeous melody under a streetlight, and she felt the specific, tight worry of a best friend who loves someone who is also, in the very best and most complicated way, an artist who cannot turn herself off. Min-seo. Quietly, beside her, you know you're allowed to just look, right? You don't have to be thinking about music right now. You just got off a 9-hour flight. Ari. Eyes still on the saxophone player, voice soft, I know. I'm not. Pause. I'm just listening. Min-seo looked at her. At the way she stood, feet planted, chin slightly lifted, body softened into the sound like water finding its level. At the way her hands had gone very still, which meant the rest of her was working very hard. At the beauty mark under her left eye, which always seemed to catch the light when she was feeling something deeply. Min-seo said nothing more. She bought them both boba from the cart next door, pressed a cup into Ari's hand, and stood beside her in the neon-soaked night while the saxophone sang something wordless and true into the soul sky. Ari was already composing. Min-seo could tell. The woman couldn't help it. She was made of music the way the ocean was made of water. It wasn't a thing she did. It was a thing she was. And no heartbreak in Atlanta, no matter how thorough, was going to change that. Min-seo took a sip of her boba and said a small, private prayer that Seoul would be kind to her best friend. Then the saxophone player hit a high, aching note, and the crowd around them made a soft collective sound of feeling, and Ari Washington, 9,000 miles from home, standing in the neon glow of a city she had arrived in 6 hours ago, smiled. The saxophone note lingers, fades. The crowd hum settles into a warm ambient pulse. A gentle piano motif, Ari's theme, rises softly underneath as the scene shifts. Scene 3. The first song. Visual reference. Ari performing on a small Hongdae outdoor stage, spotlight, purple neon, soulful expression, crowd in awe. The ambient street noise of Hongdae continues, then a ripple of silence, a micropause in the city's breathing. A single spotlight hums to life. Wind. The hush of a crowd going still. She didn't plan it. That was the truth of it, and it would remain the truth of it in every version of the story Ari Washington would tell for the rest of her life. She did not plan it. They had been walking, she and Min-seo, down a side street that opened unexpectedly into a small outdoor performance square. It was the kind of space that existed in Hongdae the way lungs existed in a body, essential, unannounced, obvious only once you were already inside it. A low wooden stage sat at one end, ringed by purple and white neon lights strung between lampposts. A single standing microphone had been left at its center. The last performer, A young man with an acoustic guitar had just packed up and walked off, and for 60 full seconds, the stage sat empty. The crowd that had gathered didn't leave. They waited, the way crowds always wait in Hongdae, with the patient, hopeful optimism of people who know that in this place, something is always about to happen. Ari stood at the edge of the square and looked at the empty stage and the empty microphone and felt something move through her that she could only describe, later, as inevitability. Minseo. Ari. A note of warning, Ari don't. Ari. I'm not. Already walking toward the stage. Minseo. You literally are right now. She stepped up onto the stage. The crowd shifted, a ripple of attention, of curiosity. A black woman in a denim jacket and loose natural curls, carry-on bag sitting at the stage steps like she had just landed from another planet, which, in a sense, she had. Reaching out and taking the standing microphone in both hands like she had held 10,000 microphones before, because she had. She closed her eyes, took one breath, let it out slow, and she sang. All other ambient sound drops away, the street noise, the music from the shops, the crowd murmur, everything falls to absolute silence, leaving only her voice. It enters the silence the way dawn enters a dark room, inevitable, golden, undeniable. No accompaniment, no track, no plan. Just her voice and the open soul night and whatever was in her chest that had been pressing against her sternum for 6 weeks, looking for the door. She sang an original, one of her own, a song she had written in her Atlanta apartment 3 weeks before everything fell apart, a song she had never performed for anyone. She had not made a conscious decision to sing the song on a stage in Hongdae on her first night in Korea. But the song came up anyway, the way songs always did when she stopped trying to control them and simply opened her mouth. It was about leaving home and not knowing where you belong. About building your whole identity around a dream, and then watching the dream dissolve overnight and not being able to remember what you were before it. About loving something so completely that you gave it your whole self, and being given back only the silence where your whole self used to be. She sang it raw and unproduced and heartbreakingly honest, and the melody lifted off her like smoke, and the street of Hongdae, that noisy, relentless, glorious, busy street, went quiet. People stopped walking. Mid-stride, they stopped. A couple who had been arguing dropped their voices and turned. 3 teenagers with bubble tea cups suspended halfway to their mouths stood motionless. A street vendor, who had been calling out prices in rapid Korean without pause for 45 minutes, stopped calling. The crowd, which had been moving the way crowds always move, ceased moving and became something else entirely, an audience. A witness. A held breath. The faint hiss of phones being raised, screen lights flickering on in the dark like small fires, dozens of them recording. The soft sound of someone crying quietly somewhere in the crowd. The city itself seems to lean in. Minseo stood at the edge of the square with her boba cup pressed to her chest, and her eyes full of tears she had been trying very hard not to shed since the airport. She had known Ari for 17 years. She had watched her perform in school talent shows and church programs and small Atlanta venues and dive bars, and, once, a stadium that seated 15,000 people. She knew every shade and texture of Ari's voice. She knew what it sounded like when Ari was performing, and she knew what it sounded like when Ari was simply being, and what was coming out of her best friend right now, unplanned and unguarded in the middle of a side street in Hongdae at 3 in the morning, was the second thing. Pure and devastating and true. The tears spilled over. Minseo let them. She pressed her fingers to her lips and whispered a thank you to no one in particular. Ari held the last note, held it, stretched it, bent it, let it fall. The crowd was absolutely silent for the 2 full seconds after it ended. Then they erupted, clapping, cheering, a few people calling out words she didn't understand but felt in her body the same way she felt music, as warmth, as weight, as something real landing. She opened her eyes. Her vision was blurred with tears she hadn't known she was crying. She blinked them clear, smiled, stepped back from the microphone. And somewhere in the shadows at the far edge of the square, in the gap between a food cart and a lamppost, at the dark seam where the neon light didn't reach, a man in a black coat stood very still, with his hands in his coat pockets and his silver watch catching the only sliver of light that found him. He had not moved in the entirety of her song. He had barely breathed. He stood in the shadow as if the shadow were a wall he had built around himself, and he watched the woman on the stage step back from the microphone, and something in his face, something that had not moved in a very long time, shifted, briefly, like ice beginning, in secret, to crack. The crowd applause fades. A distant siren somewhere across the city. Then the night settles back into its ambient hum, but different now. Charged. Changed. As if the song has altered the air itself. Scene 4. He appears. Visual reference. Ji-Hoon standing alone on a dark Seoul street under a single streetlight, half his face in shadow, cold, intense expression, neon reflections on wet pavement. Scene shift. The Hongdae street crowd fades entirely. We are somewhere else now, inside a glass boardroom, high above the city. The ambient sound is pristine silence, the kind that costs money. The hum of air conditioning. The creak of a leather chair. Then the sound of a door closing, hard and final. Ji-Hoon Kang did not come to Hongdae. This was a fact as established and immovable as the 30-floor height of the Kang Entertainment Tower or the titanium composite frame of the black car that collected him each morning at precisely 7:15. Ji-Hoon Kang did not go to Hongdae. He did not attend street performances or browse night markets or eat tteokbokki from paper cups at sidewalk carts. He attended board meetings and investor dinners and carefully curated industry events where everyone in the room either wanted something from him or was afraid of him, and these were often the same people. He was 29 years old, and he had not been young in a very long time. The board meeting with Sungwoo had ended at 11:45 p.m., late even by Kang Entertainment's brutal standards, and brutal by any standard outside of it. Ji-Hoon had sat at the far end of the table in his black wool coat. He had not removed it, a small, unconscious armor, and watched his older half-brother dismantle 3 junior executives' quarterly reports with the surgical pleasantness of a man who has never once needed to raise his voice to make someone feel destroyed. A boardroom flashback, the murmur of a high-stakes meeting. Sungwoo's voice, smooth and low, barely audible beneath the ambience. Ji-Hoon's watch ticking. The scratch of a pen on paper. Sungwoo. Korean, cool and measured. Ji-Hoon. You haven't said anything in 40 minutes. Ji-Hoon. Korean, flat. You haven't needed me to. Sungwoo. Korean, with a smile that isn't one. Be careful. Silence is only powerful when the room is uncertain you won't speak. When they stop being uncertain, it simply looks like absence. Ji-Hoon had said nothing to that. He had looked at his silver watch. He had looked at the glass wall of the boardroom, through which the Seoul skyline burned and pulsed below like a living circuit board, and he had felt, for not the first time tonight, and not for the last, the particular suffocation of a man who is exactly where everyone expects him to be and nowhere near where he might, if asked in a moment of unguarded honesty, want to go. He had not been asked. He was never asked. When the meeting finally ended and his driver pulled the car around to the building's private exit, Ji-Hoon stood in the underground garage for a moment with the car door open and the driver watching and everything exactly as it should be, and then he said, Ji-Hoon. Korean, quiet, go home. I'll walk. Driver. Korean, alarmed, sir, it's past midnight. Ji-Hoon. Korean, already turning away, go home. He walked. He never walked. He walked without direction or destination, with his hands in his coat pockets and his silver watch hidden inside the left one, not needing to see the time because for once he did not care what time it was. Seoul moved around him, a river of neon and strangers, and he moved through it the way he always moved through things, present but separate, visible but contained, a man shaped precisely like a wall. He did not know how he ended up in Hongdae. He would spend an unreasonable amount of time not thinking about how he ended up in Hongdae. He stood in the shadow between a food cart and a lamppost, the specific shadow that is found in Hongdae at this hour, where the neon light stops and the dark begins, with his collar turned up and his jaw set and everything about him arranged in the posture of a man who is waiting for nothing and expecting less. His silver watch glinted in the one thin blade of light that found him. The scar near his right eyebrow caught the edge of it, pale and precise. He was about to turn and leave. Then he heard it. A voice. A woman's voice. Rising from somewhere ahead of him, over the crowd, above the ambient noise of the street, rising the way a voice rises when it is not performing but simply existing, when it is not trying to be beautiful but simply is, the way certain things are beautiful without permission or design. It was rich and warm, and it carried something in it that Ji-Hoon Kang, who had spent the last decade of his professional life in close proximity to the most commercially successful voices in the Korean music industry, had not heard in a very long time. Maybe had never heard. A specific quality that he could not have named in any language he spoke, the sound of absolute honesty. Of a person singing something that cost them something real to sing. He did not move toward it. He was not that man. He simply stopped. Stopped turning. Stopped preparing to leave. Stood very still in his shadow, with his watch glinting and his face unreadable, and listened. The voice moved through him like a blade through silk, clean, total, irreversible. He had been cut before he knew he was bleeding. Ari's voice, distant but clear, drifting through the night air, the last bars of her song, wavering with emotion. Ji-Hoon's measured breathing. His watch ticking. A car passing somewhere. Then, silence and the crowd's applause, muffled by distance. A long pause. The ache of it. Scene 5. First look. Visual reference. Ari and Ji-Hoon locking eyes for the first time, split pink and blue neon lighting, electric tension, wet pavement, world-stopping moment. The crowd's applause peaks and begins to thin. The ambient noise of the street filters back in, but softer now, slower, as if the city itself is moving at a different tempo. A low-string note, the first note of a new theme, holds beneath everything like a question being asked in a language neither of them speaks yet. The applause moved through her like water, warm and real, and Ari stood at the microphone for a moment longer than she needed to, her eyes still closed, her chest still rising and falling with the last residue of the song, that particular, specific aftermath of a piece of yourself you've just given away to strangers, that feeling that is simultaneously emptiness and fullness, loss and arrival. Then she opened her eyes. The crowd was there, 20, 30 people, phones still raised, some of them still filming, most of them clapping, a few of them simply staring with the specific expression of people who have just heard something they weren't prepared to feel. She smiled at them. Said something in English she wasn't sure any of them understood. Stepped back from the microphone. And then, without knowing why, without any logical reason to look in that particular direction at that particular moment, she looked across the street. Past the lights. Past the food cart. Past the cluster of people and the moving stream of strangers and the bouquet explosion of neon that hung in the air like a living painting. She looked into the shadow, the specific shadow between the lamppost and the food cart, the dark seam where the neon lights stopped, and she saw him. A man in a black coat. Standing completely still in a sea of movement. His hands in his pockets. His face half in shadow, half caught by the single sliver of light that found him, enough to see the sharp line of his jaw, the straight severity of his brows, the pale scar near his right eyebrow, and a silver watch on his wrist that caught and held the light like a small cold flame. His eyes were on hers. Directly. Completely. Not the eyes of a man who had been watching the performance the way audiences watch performances, with warmth, with appreciation, with the pleasant detachment of a spectator. The eyes of a man who had been watching her. Specifically and only her. Who was still watching her. Who had not moved. Dark eyes. Unreadable. Intense in a way that had nothing to do with aggression and everything to do with depth, the specific intensity of a person who feels things they have learned not to show, for whom feeling anything at all is an act of dangerous exposure. For 3 full seconds, neither of them moved. Everything slows. The crowd noise drops to near silence, a cinematic hush. The string note holds. The pink and blue neon of the street seems to deepen, to settle over the moment like a held breath. The world, briefly, does not move. Ari was aware of the following things in rapid succession, in the 3 seconds that she looked at him. That he was very still in a way that most people were not. That he was looking at her the way people only look at things they have been trying not to want. That she had no idea who he was, had never seen him before in her life, was 9,000 miles from home standing on a wooden stage in Seoul with mascara on her cheeks and sauce from someone's tteokbokki on her jacket. And that none of this seemed to matter in the slightest. That something about him felt, in a way she could not explain and would not try to, like the next line of the song she had just sung. Like the part of the melody she hadn't written yet. She held the look. He held it. The city held its breath. Then someone bumped her shoulder, a teenager moving through the dispersing crowd, oblivious, apologetic in rapid Korean, and the spell snapped. She looked away for 1 second, steadied herself, turned back. He was gone. The shadow between the lamppost and the food cart was empty. The sliver of light that had caught his watch had nothing to catch now. The crowd moved and surged and the city resumed its volume and its velocity and everything was exactly as it had been before, except that the air where he had been standing felt different. Charged. Like the air after lightning. Min-seo. Arriving at her side, voice bright with emotion, Ari. Ari. That was, I can't even, do you know people were crying? I was crying. That man over there was crying. Ari. Distracted. Scanning the crowd across the street, Min-seo. Did you see him? Min-seo. See who? Ari. Literally everyone in this square was watching you. Ari. There was a man. Over there. Black coat. He was standing in the shadow, watching, and then he was gone. Min-seo looked where Ari was looking. Saw nothing but the lamp post and the food cart and the ordinary motion of Hongdae at 3 in the morning. She looked back at Ari with the measured expression of a best friend conducting a wellness check. Min-seo. Okay. You've been awake for approximately 26 hours, you've eaten 1 cup of tteokbokki, and you just sang your heart out in the street in Seoul. I think we should get you horizontal. Ari. Still looking at the empty shadow. He was real, Min. He was standing right there. He had a watch. Min-seo. Many people have watches, Ari. Ari finally looked away from the empty shadow. She picked up her carry-on from the stage steps. She let Min-seo take her by the arm and steer her back into the flow of the street. But something in her did not settle back into its ordinary position. Something had shifted, the same shift she had felt at the airport window when she first saw the city, but closer now. More specific. More urgent. Like a melody she hadn't heard yet. Like the beginning of something she didn't have a name for. Like a note rung in the dark that refuses to fade. The string theme rises briefly, 2 voices this time, a cello and a violin, separate and unresolved, seeking each other through the noise. Then the city absorbs them both. Scene transition. Scene Scene 6. The rain. Visual reference. Ari standing alone in Seoul rain, damp natural curls, neon reflections on wet pavement, Ji-Hoon watching from a distance. The first drops of rain barely audible at first, a soft percussion on pavement that builds slowly, inexorably, into a full Seoul downpour. Neon signs blurring and doubling in the wet pavement. Thunder, distant and low. The sound of people running for cover, laughing and cursing and opening umbrellas, the city adjusting itself around the rain the way it always does, briefly, thoroughly, without drama. The rain came 40 minutes later, without warning and without apology, the way Seoul summer rain always comes, like a decision that has already been made on your behalf. Min-seo ran for the nearest covered doorway, pulling her phone out of her jacket and tucking it into her bra with the practiced speed of someone who has lived through many Seoul rain events. She made it under the awning and turned to grab Ari's hand, and found Ari standing in the middle of the sidewalk. Not running. Not shielding her curls. Not doing any of the things a person instinctively does when rain arrives unexpectedly. Simply standing. Min-seo. Ari. Ari, your hair. Ari did not come under the awning. She stood in the middle of the wet sidewalk, her denim jacket darkening at the shoulders, her natural curls beginning to absorb the rain and grow heavy with it, long dark tendrils pulling loose from the loose mass of her hair and falling across her forehead, her cheekbones, her jaw. She turned her face up to the sky, closed her eyes, let the rain find every part of her it could reach. She was crying. She knew she was crying because she could feel the specific warmth of tears against the cold of the rain. But in the rain, you could not tell. In the rain, crying was just another form of wet. In the rain, you could be completely undone in public and no one would know. And there was something in this, something particular and private and necessary. That was what she needed tonight, at the end of the longest day she had lived in months, maybe years. She was thinking about Atlanta. About the studio session 6 weeks ago where her A&R rep had sat across from her with his hands folded and told her, very gently and very finally, that the label was moving in a different direction. That the sound they had developed together over 18 months, the sound she had bled into, shaped from the marrow of herself, was not marketable in the current climate. That they wished her well. She was thinking about Marcus, the boyfriend who had also been the producer, who had also been the reason she stayed at the label past the first red flag, and then the second, and then the third. Who had told her she wasn't ready for the stage he was offering. Who had, it turned out, been offering that stage to someone else entirely, and had been doing so for the better part of 2 years. She was thinking about the 9 months of demos she had made that now lived on a hard drive in a box in her mother's spare bedroom in Atlanta, because she had not been able to look at them when she packed. She was thinking about how she had believed, completely and without reservation, that music was the thing she had been put on earth to do, and how much more terrifying that belief was when you were also, somehow, the last person anyone seemed to want to hear sing. Until tonight. An unplanned song on a borrowed microphone in a city she had arrived in 6 hours ago. Strangers in a country she had never visited stopping mid-stride to listen. Phones raised. Someone crying. Minseo's face at the edge of the crowd, the face of a person witnessing something undeniable. She turned her face up to the rain and let it have her. Let it take whatever it wanted. Grief, anger, exhaustion, that particular jagged hope that refuses to die even when every reasonable piece of evidence suggests it should. She did not notice the man in the black coat on the other side of the street. The rain intensifies slightly. Neon signs reflect in the growing puddles on the pavement, pink, blue, gold, shimmering and broken. The city noise softens around the rain, as if in deference to it. Ji-Hoon had not gone home, out on the other side of the street. He had walked 3 blocks in the direction of home, and then stopped, in the specific way a person stops when something they have decided to leave behind has attached itself to them invisibly and made the leaving impossible. He had stood on the corner for approximately 45 seconds, with every intention of hailing a car. And then he had turned around. He told himself it was not to find her. He was simply walking. He walked in whatever direction his feet carried him, and his feet happened to carry him back toward the performance square. This was a logistical coincidence. This was not a choice. He found her standing in the rain. He stopped, half hidden in the doorway of a closed convenience store on the opposite side of the street. Far enough that she could not see him. Close enough that he could see her face tilted up to the sky, the rain running down her warm brown skin in rivulets, her curls heavy and loose and alive with it. She stood in the rain the way she had stood at the microphone, like she belonged to it. Like she had some arrangement with the elements that the rest of the world had not been consulted about. There was something in the posture, the openness of it, the refusal to protect herself from whatever the sky was handing out, that struck Ji-Hoon in a place he had not expected to be struck. He was a careful man. He had trained himself to be a man of closed doors and managed exposure. He had learned early and thoroughly what happened when you opened yourself to something you could not control. You lost it, and the losing took something of you with it that you never entirely recovered. He had made himself a fortress of controlled distances. He did not let things in. And yet, he watched her stand in the rain, open, present, soaked through, face to the sky, and something inside the fortress, at the very base of it, in the oldest stone of the oldest wall, moved. Fractionally, barely perceptibly, but moved. He had not allowed himself to feel something like this in 5 years. Not since Ji-Hoon. Not since the girl his family had decided was a liability and eliminated, quietly and permanently, from both his life and the Korean music industry. For no reason except that she had gotten too close to him, and closeness was something the Kang family could not afford to leave unmanaged. He would not be the reason another person lost everything. He had promised himself that. It was the only promise he had kept consistently in 5 years. He watched the woman in the rain for one more moment. Then he turned up his collar. And he walked away into the night with his hands in his pockets and his silver watch hidden in the left one, and the sound of that voice still lodged somewhere between his ribs, refusing to move. His footsteps on the wet pavement, fading. The rain continues, softer now, a gentle and steady curtain. Ari's breathing long and slow and steadying. The city hums at a low, private frequency. Scene transition. Scene 7. Ji-Hoon alone. Visual reference. Ji-Hoon standing on a high rooftop overlooking Seoul city skyline at night, back slightly turned, weight of the world, lonely and burdened. Scene shift, we ascend. The rain below is now a distant whisper. Wind at height clean and cold, 30 floors above the city. The deep ambient hum of Seoul from above. Traffic, 10,000 lit windows, a helicopter somewhere in the middle distance. Below it all, that low cello note, Ji-Hoon's theme, slow and restrained and carrying something old in it. The Kang penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of the building that bore the family name, in the Gangnam district, where everything was expensive and nothing was accidental, and the city spread itself out below like a reward. Ji-Hoon had grown up in this building. He had learned to walk in it, to sit in board meetings in it at an age when other children were learning to ride bicycles. He had never once, in 29 years, thought of it as a home. He did not go inside when he arrived. He took the private elevator directly to the rooftop terrace, 30 stories above Seoul, open to the sky. The city fanned out below him in every direction like a circuit board built by gods who had later forgotten it was alive. The rain had not reached this height yet, or had already passed it. The terrace was dry and cold, and the air tasted of altitude and distance. He stood at the railing with his hands around it, silver watch face up on his left wrist, the city glittering below him. He did not look at the watch. He looked at the city. And then he stopped looking at either, because what he was actually doing, what he had been doing since he turned and walked away from a woman standing in the rain who did not know he existed, was listening to a voice in his memory that refused, with remarkable persistence, to stop. He had a very good memory for music. It was, in the industry, considered an asset. Tonight, for the first time in his professional life, he found it inconvenient. He replayed it analytically, or tried to. The voice. The timbre of it, warm, full, with a particular quality in the lower register that was both intimate and enormous, like a fire in a cathedral. The control, which was not the studied control of training, but the innate control of someone whose instrument was simply built that way, from the foundation up. The way she had held the last note, the particular courage of holding a note past the comfortable point, past the safe point, into the territory where it either becomes transcendent or collapses, and it had become transcendent. He tried to think about it clinically. He tried to arrange it in the language he used for his professional assessments: marketability, range classification, crossover potential. He could not. The voice would not stay in those categories. It kept slipping out of them into something he did not have professional language for, which was the category of things that matter beyond the market, beyond the industry, beyond the entire apparatus of commerce that he had spent his adult life inside of. The category of things that are simply true. A single piano note, the first note of Ari's melody from the performance, heard now from Ji-Hoon's memory, floating on the rooftop air. Then silence. Then it comes again, slightly differently, not a performance, but a haunting. The cello joins it, low and unresolved. He thought about Ji-Hoon. He did not often allow himself to think about her. He had placed the memory of her in the specific interior room that a person builds when they have done something, or allowed something to be done, that they cannot undo. A room with no windows and a very heavy door, and the understanding that what is kept inside it cannot be changed, only carried. Ji-Hoon had been 22 years old when he met her. A trainee at a smaller agency, gifted and fierce and wholly herself in the way that some young artists are before the industry gets to them. He had seen something in her that he recognized, not because it was like him, but because it was the opposite of him, free, unguarded, unafraid of her own feeling. He had been, without intending to and against every instinct he had, drawn to her. He had not hidden it well enough. Or at all. Sungwoo noticed everything and had made it clear, in the tone of a man discussing a scheduling conflict rather than a human life, that an attachment of that kind was a strategic liability the company could not absorb. Her agency had lost its key contracts with Kang Entertainment overnight. Her career had dissolved within 6 months. She had disappeared from the industry entirely. Ji-Hoon had not contacted her. He had told himself it was to protect her from further damage. He had never fully believed himself. He had made himself a promise the night he understood what his family had done. A promise that had held, until tonight, without significant challenge. He would not be the gravity that pulled someone into his orbit. He would not let someone be close enough to him that his family had reason to notice them. He would keep every door closed. He would not feel things. He would not begin things he could not protect. He turned away from the railing. He faced the penthouse door, glass and steel and warm light inside, the empty architecture of a life arranged for appearance rather than living. He said it to himself, quietly, in the cold rooftop air, as a man says things he needs to believe. Ji-Hoon. Korean, barely audible to himself, I will not see her again. He went inside. The glass door closed behind him with the soft, precise click of an expensive thing built to shut out the world. The city glittered on below, indifferent and enormous, and the voice in his memory sang on and on and on in the one room of himself he had never learned to lock. The piano note sounds one final time, suspended, unresolved. The wind on the rooftop, then the door click, and then silence. Scene transition. A softer, warmer tone, we move toward morning, toward the next day. Scene 8. Almost. Visual reference. Ari and Ji-Hoon dangerously close, almost touching, pink and blue split lighting, electric tension, almost but not yet. Morning in Seoul. The sounds of a city waking, the clatter and hiss of a cafe opening, the distant beep of a crosswalk signal, the clatter of coffee cups and the low murmur of Korean conversation. Warm. Domestic, unhurried. The sun must be out. Everything sounds brighter. Underneath it all, a piano soft and tentative, the beginning of something being composed. She had slept for 11 hours without dreaming, which was the longest and most dreamless sleep she had had in 6 weeks, and she had woken up in Min-seo's spare room, which smelled of lavender and book pages and the specific warm paper scent of a person who has made a home carefully, with her curls pressed flat on one side and the deep, particular restfulness of a body that has finally, after a very long time, let go of something. She did not know what she had let go of. She was not going to examine it. She was going to have coffee. Min-seo had left her a note on the kitchen counter, went to work, back by 6. There's a cafe 2 blocks from here called Blue Note, you'll love it. Do not sing in the street again before I'm there to film it properly. Ari smiled at the note, tucked it in her pocket, went to find the cafe. Blue Note was the kind of cafe that seemed to exist in every city that has decided it takes music seriously, small and warmly lit, with mismatched chairs and a playlist that moved intelligently from jazz to soul to something slow and Korean that she didn't recognize but wanted to. She ordered an Americano in 3 words of Korean that Min-seo had drilled into her on the drive from the airport and settled into a corner table with her notebook, and she wrote for 2 hours without stopping. Song fragments, mostly. Lines that came up like breath. She did not try to make them into anything yet. She simply let them arrive and wrote them down in her notebook with its soft leather cover, in the handwriting that was too large and slightly sideways and wholly her own. A lyric about landing. A lyric about a shadow. A lyric about a man with dark eyes and something unfinished in his face that she kept seeing every time she closed hers. She was not thinking about the man with the silver watch. She was absolutely not thinking about the man with the silver watch. She wrote 3 more lines about him and closed the notebook. She needed more coffee. She needed air. She gathered her things and stood, and walked toward the cafe door and reached a catch of breath. Then, the soft sound of a hand catching a wrist. Very close. The world narrows to a single radius of shared air. They nearly collided in the doorway. He was coming in. She was going out. The door was narrow enough that it became an inevitability, and his hand caught her arm before she stumbled. A fast, instinctive gesture, his grip firm and warm around the sleeve of her jacket, steadying her. She found her footing. Looked up. It was him. Black coat, even in the morning. Jet black hair slightly rearranged from the night before, 1 or 2 pieces falling across his forehead in a way that was maddeningly unintentional. Sharp jaw. Straight brows. The scar near his right eyebrow, pale and specific in the morning light. Silver watch on his left wrist, visible at the edge of his sleeve. His left hand still around the door handle while his right hand still held her arm. Dark eyes. Looking at hers. From close range this time, no crowd between them, no neon to diffuse it, no performance square, and no rain. Just a cafe doorway and approximately 14 inches of shared air, and the impossible, vertiginous fact that this was the second time in fewer than 8 hours that they had been in the same place without either of them knowing the other would be there. His cologne reached her before any other conscious impression, cedar and cold air, and something underneath both that she couldn't name. Clean and warm and disorienting in a way that had absolutely nothing to do with the 11 hours of sleep she'd gotten and everything to do with standing approximately 14 inches from a person whose proximity was doing something specific and unreasonable to her cardiovascular system. Her curls were in her face. His face was inches from her curls. Neither of them had moved. The cafe played something slow and Korean from its speakers. Sunlight came through the window behind him and caught the silver of his watch and the pale line of the scar and the particular quality of his eyes, which were up close, in the morning light, with no distance between them, not simply dark but layered. Something watchful on the surface and something else, much further down, that she recognized from mirrors, from notebooks, from the space inside her chest that held all the things she had not yet found the words for. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them moved. The moment stretched a held note, the specific held note that is the most dangerous kind, the one that is being held because both parties know that when it resolves, something will change. A single piano note, held, resonant, filling the small cafe space. Then, a phone rings. Loud, sudden, shattering the held note completely. His phone. In his coat pocket. Ringing with the specific urgency of someone who knows he will answer. The spell broke. He let go of her arm. She felt the absence of his hand immediately, specifically, in a way that was disproportionate to the contact, which had lasted perhaps 5 seconds and had been entirely accidental. He stepped back. 1 step, then 2, recalibrating, composing, returning himself to whatever he had been before the door. His jaw reset into its habitual line. His face closed. He reached into his pocket and looked at the phone screen, and for just a moment, before his expression locked back into position, she saw something move across it. Something that might, in another face, have been frustration. Might, in his, have been something closer to resignation. He said something in Korean. Low, brief, directed at the space between them rather than at her directly. She caught none of it, not a syllable, not a word, but the tone of it was not unkind. It was the tone of an apology from someone who is not accustomed to making them and is therefore not certain whether they are doing it correctly. Then he answered the phone, turned his shoulder slightly, walked past her into the cafe without looking back. Ji-Hoon. Into phone, Korean, walking away.
알아. 가고 있어?
Translation. Brother. I know. I'm on my way. Ari stood in the cafe doorway and watched him go. Watched the way he moved, unhurried, deliberate, contained, to a corner table, his back mostly to the room, the phone to his ear. The silver watch on his wrist as his hand rested on the table. The man from last night. The man from the shadow. The man who had stood completely still while she sang, and then been gone in the second she looked away. Standing 14 inches from her in a cafe doorway in the morning like a sentence in a language she was only just beginning to learn. She did not know his name. She did not know why he was here. She knew that cedar and cold air smell, and that his eyes in the morning light held something she recognized, and that her heart was doing something completely unreasonable in her chest for a person she had never spoken a word to. She pushed open the cafe door, stepped out into the Seoul morning, and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, notebook pressed to her chest, curls in the wind, with a very specific feeling of a person who has just heard the opening bar of a song that is going to be extremely difficult to get out of her head. The cafe doors swing shut. Street sounds bloom around her. The piano theme, hers and his together now, tentatively approaching each other, plays beneath the ambient noise of the morning city. Scene transition. Scene 9. The night in Hongdae. Visual reference. Ari performing under neon Hongdae lights. Ji-Hoon watching from the shadows. Episode 1 hero image. Night falls again. The Hongdae soundscape returns, richer now, denser, the full orchestra of the district at peak hours. Music from every direction. Laughter. The sizzle of street food. The distant beat of a bass line from a club somewhere. And underneath it all, building slowly, a sense of anticipation, the quiet electricity of something about to happen that cannot be stopped. She did not tell Min Seo she was going back to the stage. She did not entirely tell herself either. She said she wanted to walk, which was true, and that she wanted to see Hongdae at night again, which was also true, and that she was going to get tteokbokki from the old woman's cart, which was simply a logistical bonus. But her feet knew where they were going before her mind had finished negotiating with itself about it. And her feet brought her to the performance square at 9:15 with her notebook in her jacket pocket and the same borrowed microphone energy humming in her chest that had been humming there since she'd stepped off the plane, quiet and persistent, like a frequency she couldn't tune out. The stage was occupied when she arrived, a young Korean woman playing keyboard, very good, already drawing a crowd, and Ari stood at the back and listened and waited, and did not examine why she was waiting. When the keyboard player finished her set and stepped off the stage with a bow, the crowd applauded warmly, and then the stage sat empty again, and the crowd waited again, and Ari thought, not again, and walked up to the stage again. Min Seo. Voice note message, heard through Ari's earphones as she walks up the stage steps. I know where you are right now. I know it. I'm on my way. Do not start without, okay, you're already starting, aren't you? You know what, fine. I'm filming when I get there. Ari smiled at the voice note. She stepped up to the microphone. She had written, in the cafe that morning and in Min Seo's spare room that afternoon, a song she had not known she was writing until she looked at the notebook page and found it there in its entirety, complete and whole, the way the best songs arrive. Not assembled but discovered, as if they had always existed and you were simply the person who happened to be in the right state of openness to receive them. She did not know exactly who the song was about. She had not allowed herself to know exactly who the song was about. She had written it in the language of metaphor and image and felt experience, the way all her best songs lived, in the specific rather than the general. In the cedar smell and the dark eyes and the silver watch and the way it felt to be looked at by someone who appeared to have forgotten how to look at things and remembered, briefly, for the length of a song. She took the microphone. She opened her mouth. She sang. Her voice rises from the stage, clear and full and immediate, filling the square, spilling out into the surrounding streets. The ambient noise of Hongdae drops away again, as if by agreement. The neon lights, purple and gold and pink, seem to deepen around her, turning her curls to something luminous, unearthly, and entirely real at once. The song was a different animal than the one she had sung the night before. The first had been excavation, the raw, unplanned opening of a wound she had been carrying. This one was something else, an arrival. A question she was asking rather than a wound she was showing. Its melody moved differently, more certain in the verses, more searching in the chorus, as if it kept reaching for a resolution it couldn't quite find. She sang about a man with dark eyes who stood in the shadow and watched a woman stand in the rain. She sang about cedar and cold air and the specific, terrible feeling of a held note that breaks before it resolves. She sang about landing in a city you've never been to and feeling, against all reason, like you've come home. About the melody you hear in someone's face before you know their name. She didn't know she was singing about him. She was absolutely singing about him. The crowd filled in as she sang thicker than the night before, because word had spread the way word spreads in Hongdae when something is real. Quickly and without machinery, person to person, a hand on an arm, a look in the direction of something worth looking at. By the second chorus, the square was full. Phones were raised. A young woman near the front was crying openly, the way you cry when a song says exactly the thing you have been trying to say and couldn't. Minseo arrived at the edge of the crowd at the third verse, breathing hard from having jogged, phone up and filming before she'd fully stopped moving. She elbowed gently through to a clear line of sight, and she watched Ari, and her expression, the one she wore when Ari was being most fully herself, most undeniable, settled into the calm, certain pride of someone who has always known exactly what they are witnessing. The neon turned Ari's curls to purple and gold. The spotlight caught the beauty mark under her left eye. She closed her eyes in the chorus, tipped her chin, and let the song have everything it asked for, every register, every feeling, every held note stretched past the safe point into the territory of truth. In the shadow at the edge of the crowd, in the specific dark seam between the neon light and the ordinary night, the shadow that seemed, in Hongdae, to exist in the same geometry as where he had stood the night before. Ji-Hoon Kang stood with his hands in his pockets and his silver watch hidden in the left one, and listened to every word. He had told himself he was walking. He had told himself many things tonight. He had stopped telling himself things approximately 20 minutes ago when his feet, with the calm, categorical authority of the body over the mind, brought him back to Hongdae and to this square and to this shadow, where he stood now without argument or negotiation, and listened. She was singing about him. He knew it the way he knew things he was not supposed to know, quietly, in the part of himself that preceded language. She didn't know his name. She didn't know who he was. But she had seen something in the shadow and the rain and the cafe doorway and turned it into this, turned it into something true and beautiful and completely without armor. The way certain people can transmute the raw material of a single unspoken encounter into something that sounds like the inside of your own chest. He listened. He stood absolutely still, and he listened. And something happened that Ji-Hoon Kang had not permitted to happen in 5 years, and would not have a name for until much later, in a different kind of darkness, with her standing much closer than this. He felt something. Not managed. Not contained. Not processed from a careful distance. Something that arrived without asking permission, that bypassed every door he had built and every wall he had reinforced, and settled into the room he had believed was empty and found it was not empty at all, had never been empty, had simply been waiting, with the patience of something that knows it cannot be avoided forever, for exactly this frequency to find it. The song ended on a held note that she bent at the last second into something unexpected, a resolution that didn't resolve the way it was supposed to, that landed somewhere new, somewhere he hadn't predicted, somewhere that felt less like an ending and more like the opening bar of whatever came next. The crowd erupted. Ji-Hoon did not move. He stood in his shadow and listened to the silence after the note, and in that silence, in the 2 specific, suspended seconds between the last note and the first wave of applause, he made the decision that would change everything. The decision that his mind had been building walls against for 24 hours while his body had been quietly, persistently, making its way back to this square. He was going to find out who she was. The crowd applause rises full, warm, real. Minseo's laugh, somewhere in the crowd, delighted and bright. Then the applause softens, and beneath it, the 2-theme piano, Ari and Ji-Hoon's separate melodies beginning, for the first time, to move toward each other. Building. Urgent. The scene is about to turn. Scene 10. Scooter cliffhanger. Visual reference. Ari and Ji-Hoon on a scooter racing through neon Seoul streets, Ari's curls flying, danger and electricity, cliffhanger ending. The crowd dispersing, that particular sound, the gentle dissolution of a gathered thing, people moving back into the city's current, conversations resuming, music from the shops re-entering the foreground. Ari's footsteps on the stage steps. The city breathing normally again. And then a change. Something shifts in the ambient sound, quieter, deliberate, a purposeful stillness that is different from the ordinary quiet of the street. 2 car doors closing. Unhurried. Precise. The set ended and the crowd began to disperse, and Ari stepped off the stage with her notebook in her hand and her curls loose around her face and the particular, bone-deep satisfaction of a person who has just handed a piece of themselves to strangers and gotten something invisible and necessary back in return. She was looking for Min-seo, scanning the dispersing crowd for the black bob and the curtain bangs, when Min-seo found her first. Not with her usual bright wave and a shouted compliment across the square. With a grip on her arm that was too tight and too fast, and a voice that had lost all its warmth and was running at a frequency Ari had not heard from Min-seo in 17 years of friendship. Fear, stripped of performance, stripped of reassurance. Absolutely clean. Min-seo. Low, urgent, teeth barely parted. Ari. Don't look. Don't turn your head. There's a black car at the corner. 2 men got out. They've been watching you since you stepped off the stage. We need to go. Right now. Ari. Very still, voice low. What? Min, I just got here yesterday. Min-seo. I know. I don't know what this is. I don't know who they are. I just know suits in Hongdae at night watching a person they don't know is not good. Walk with me. Casual. Now. Ari allowed herself one sideways glance. At the corner of the square, parked at the curb with its engine running, sat a black sedan with tinted windows, the specific, anonymous luxury of a car that does not want to be noticed and achieves, by virtue of how aggressively it refuses to stand out, the opposite effect entirely. 2 men stood beside it. Dark suits. Earpieces. Eyes, she caught their eyes for the half-second she looked fixed precisely and without pretense on her. She felt something cold move through her that had nothing to do with the night air. Ari. Still walking, to Min-seo. Why would anyone be watching me? I literally landed here yesterday. Min-seo. I don't know. But people filmed you last night and again tonight, and this is Seoul, and the industry here is Ari. Just trust me. We need to move. She trusted Min-seo. She had always trusted Min-seo. She tightened her grip on her notebook and matched Min-seo's pace, not running, not drawing attention, simply 2 women moving through a crowd the way women move through crowds when they know they are being watched, with the specific, surface-level calm of controlled adrenaline. They had made it perhaps 30 feet when she heard a sound that stopped her as effectively as a hand on her shoulder. A scooter engine. Right behind her. Slowing. She turned. He was there. Black coat. Jet black hair. Silver watch on the hand that held the handlebar. The scooter idling beside her, matte black, small. Not what she would have imagined for him. Not that she had imagined anything for him. Not that she had been composing entire songs about him all afternoon. His eyes found hers immediately. He said one word. In English, the first English word she had heard from him, and it arrived with the weight of all the words he hadn't said, clean and direct and carrying an instruction she somehow, despite knowing nothing about him, found she trusted completely. Ji-Hoon. Come. He reached behind him and produced a helmet, black, already set and ready, the helmet of a man who had come prepared, which meant he had come knowing, which meant he had been watching longer than she knew, which should have made her afraid and instead, in the extraordinary, inexplicable, entirely unreasonable logic of the moment, made her feel the opposite of afraid. Min-seo grabbed her arm. Min-seo. Rapid, under her breath. Ari, you do not know this man. Ari. Looking at Ji-Hoon, looking at the black car, looking back at Ji-Hoon, I know. Min-seo. Ari. Ari. Find somewhere safe and text me. I'll be okay. She took the helmet. She didn't know him. She didn't know his name. She didn't know why 2 men in dark suits were watching her, or how this cold, beautiful stranger with the scar above his eyebrow and the one English word had appeared precisely in the moment she needed him to. or whether any of this was a rescue or a different kind of danger wearing rescue's face. She didn't know any of it. She put on the helmet. She swung her leg over the back of the scooter and found the handholds and settled her weight behind his and felt, through the back of his coat, the contained stillness of his body, ready, braced, already in motion even while they were standing still. The men in the suits had spotted them. She saw one of them touch his earpiece, saw the other move toward the car. Ji-Hoon's jaw set like iron. He didn't look back. The scooter engine accelerates, a sharp, urgent burst of sound. Tires on wet pavement. The rush of the city coming at them from all directions as they pull out into traffic. Wind. Speed. The Hongdae streetlights streaking past in pink and blue and gold. Seoul blurred around them. A city turned into streaks, neon pink and electric blue and gold bleeding into the periphery as the scooter wove through the night traffic with the certainty of someone who knows every street. Ji-Hoon drove without hesitation, without checking mirrors, with the quiet authority of a man who has decided on a direction and intends to maintain it. Ari held on. Her notebook was tucked inside her jacket, pressed against her chest. Her curls flew behind her, loose and alive in the rush of the wind, trailing in the neon light like something flung toward the sky. She could smell his coat, cedar and cold air, and feel the steadiness of him through it, and the city was loud and enormous and racing past in every direction, and she did not feel afraid. She felt, in the surging and unreasonable and entirely specific way of a person on the back of a scooter in Seoul at night, holding on to a stranger she has written a song about and whose name she does not know alive. Fully and dangerously and irreversibly alive, in the way she had not felt in Atlanta in a very long time. In the way she had, without knowing she was. A car engine closer. Headlights in the distance, gaining. The black sedan. Purposeful. Patient. Following. The black car was following them. She could see its headlights in the gap between buildings as they turned, steady, deliberate, maintaining distance, but not losing it. She tightened her grip on him without thinking about it. Felt his breathing steady and remain steady, which was either the behavior of a man who is used to being followed or a man who is not afraid of it, and she was not certain yet which of these was more comforting and which was more alarming. She faced forward again. Seoul moved around them in its gorgeous, indifferent sweep. He took a turn she didn't anticipate, and the city opened up into a wider boulevard, a river of traffic and light, neon towers on either side, the distant dark ribbon of the Han River somewhere ahead of them, the mountains at the edge of the skyline holding their old and patient positions against the glow. She did not know where he was taking her. She did not know his name. She did not know who the men in the suits were, or what they wanted, or what chapter of what story she had arrived in the middle of when she stepped onto that stage with a borrowed microphone and sang her heart out in a foreign city on her first night in the country. She held on. He drove. The city streaked past in pink and blue and gold. And the night swallowed them whole. The scooter engine fading into the city. The headlights of the black car still following, shrinking as they gain distance. Then, the sound drops away entirely, leaving only the orchestral score, both themes together now, fully merged for the first time, urgent and unresolved and sweeping, rising towards something that has not yet arrived. Held. Suspended. The episode ends on the sound of a city that knows something the audience doesn't yet. In Seoul, the music finds you. Even when you're running from it. Even when you're not ready. Even when the person listening is the one person you should never trust. End of episode 1. The Night the City Sang. Seoul in Seoul is an original work of fiction. All characters, events, organizations, and locations portrayed in this script are entirely fictional and used for creative storytelling purposes only. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. Episode 2 coming soon. Seoul.